Hey guys, welcome back for more tutorials. My name is Magnet, and today we're going to be talking about a very fundamental part of TvZ, and that is using your Marines properly. And TvZ is definitely one of those matchups where if you can use your Marines properly, you can make these super cheap units just absolutely run over your opponents. And I'm phrasing this a little weird because if you think about Bio, which is Marine Medevac Marauder, it really comes down to how you control your Marines and how you keep them alive. So I want to focus mostly on the Marine component of this, and we're going to talk about supporting them properly as the game goes on. We've seen a lot of stuff from TvZ already, but now it's time to just get into those later phases of the game where it's about winning with your unit composition rather than just suggesting that you just make Marines and Marauders and go fight. So we'll go ahead and talk about this here in the game. And we're going to be watching Daishi, and he's really one of my favorite European Terrans. He's playing against Mini Razor. And of course this is from WCS Europe. So we're going to fast forward into the point where the bio build starts to get going. And like we've talked about a lot already in other videos, there's a lot of ways to get started in this matchup. And the way that most people start is with Reapers and Hellions. Sometimes they'll go Banshees, but after that, if they want to do a bio composition, it'll be starting Stim and adding Barracks. So we're just going to mostly be focusing on his build rather than the units that are across the map harassing, because you're going to see that in like every single TvZ right now. So there's not much of a reason to keep rehashing that over and over. So Reaper's coming out now, second Depot's coming up, and this is really common just to drop the expansion once he has the money and once he gets the second Reaper started. So you'll see the expansion coming down here in just a second. And back here, again, a good way to springboard into this is to start up Hellions. So he's starting a reactor and a factory. This is all super common stuff, nothing too unusual. And you can see a third command center on the way as well. So, I mean, really, a lot of times in TvZ you're going to go for as much economy as you can so that you can fund some type of big attack. It's on usually 3 bases, which we'll talk about in a future video, but this one in particular, he's just going straight for Stim. So the idea is that once your Hellions have started producing, if you want to go straight forward and skip the Banshee phase, you just land your barracks, start your tech lab, and you're going to start Stim on that as soon as possible. You want to line this up so that you have Stim and Medevacs coming out at the same time, and your first timing is really going to be when your first 2 Medevacs are ready. You can start getting out there and using your Marines to gain an advantage, whether it's through drops or whether it's just through straight up attacking them and controlling well against their Banelings and other units. So we will see that come down here in a sec. Should start Stim as soon as he has the money, which he does right now. So there we go. You can see some Marines on the way. And usually with this third command center, you're going to get a lot of extra economies. You need to make sure you can spend your money to make this work out. And like I said, we're not focusing too much on the harass that's going on the other side of the map as well. I wouldn't make more than maybe 6 to 8 Hellions most of the time. So we've talked about this already. You basically just need to try and keep Zerg a little slowed down and keep these units active while getting into the next stage of your build. But more often than not, getting into the next stage of the build is really more important than worrying about all that stuff. So he's going to start a barracks here. He really wants to start a starport here in just a little bit. So he starts a reactor. A third barracks is on the way, so good production level for 2 bases is 3 barracks and a reactor starport producing medevacs. That'll really balance out your economy pretty well. There's a lot of different timings you can add these extra barracks, so I'd really just play your own games and feel out when it feels right for you to do it. I don't want you to worry too much about getting your timings all perfect as far as adding barracks, because it's more so about the idea and it's about what you feel comfortable with. When you get super advanced in playing, you can start worrying about stuff like that. So he's going to go ahead and land another reactor here, and here comes his starport now. You can see he's on 2 reactors and 1 tech lab. The tech lab's really only necessary for Stim. You're going to want to follow that up with Marine shields right away, so you want to do that if you're going to be going with a Marine-based strategy as well. So adding on 2 more barracks here, and if you line this up right, you're going to see that this build continues to progress so that he has 2 medevacs ready. He'll have Stim and combat shields, and he's going to combine his forces with what's already out here. So these first few units are going to be kind of folded into the first attack. He's going to have basically 6 Hellions, a Reaper, which doesn't mean that much, and enough Marines to fill up 2 medevacs roughly. And the whole idea is just to keep his Marines alive and keep the push going for as long as possible. And that's going to be the whole theme behind any of your Marine-based pushes, is how long can I keep this going by keeping my Marines alive and killing the Zerg's units. So he's rallying down here now. You can see him start to push out, and he knows that he can line this up so that the medevacs will just fly out there and meet the army once he's ready. So starting to run these Marines around just a little bit. Gonna check to be sure that there's no overlords or Zerglings blocking this base. But the medevacs come up now, and this is going to be the beginning of what we're going to talk about. People like to call it Marine splitting or splits or whatever. The whole idea is that from the Zerg perspective, you're going to be producing banelings, and the banelings are going to be what kills the Marines. And if you weren't to control this correctly, these 6 banelings could kill, or rather 7 banelings, these 7 banelings could kill a ton if you just stood your army there and let the banelings blow up whatever they want. That's definitely what you don't want. The whole idea is to try and get it so that only one baneling is hitting one Marine in an ideal scenario. And the micro is really fast, but the whole idea that you need to be on top of is that you need to separate these Marines out and let other units kill the banelings, or maybe just make the banelings trade inefficiently with the Marines. Basically, you just need to keep your Marines alive at all costs, and the banelings are the #1 concern. So this has been a staple in StarCraft 2 for a long time. Just keep your Marines alive and split them against things that have splash damage, like banelings, for example. They're the biggest reason why that whole term was invented. So we're going to see this start to develop here. So the Marines stim forward. You don't want to stim too much, but you do have the medevacs here to keep these alive. And you really just want to get as far in as possible. You always want to try to get into a point where you're dealing damage to a Zerg base. But once these banelings and stuff start coming up, you can see more are morphing right now. Where are his original banelings? I don't know what he's doing with those right now, but I don't know where they went. Did he just accidentally blow them up? I think he did. So that's kind of silly. I never noticed that in the first time of the replay. I think he accidentally blew up his original banelings because I don't see them anywhere and they haven't really done anything. So I guess that's fortunate for Daishi. But coming up here, if there's a lot of Zerglings, again, the whole idea is just to keep the Marines alive. So the Hellions are good to buffer against these Zerglings here for just a little while. But the banelings are the bigger concern eventually. You can see the Zerglings trying to get us around on here. The Hellions will deal a lot of splash damage to the Zerglings, and as long as you still have Marines alive, you can continue your push. So he's going to keep pushing in here. Eventually we're going to see banelings start to get mixed into this. There's a lot of Queens here. Not a whole lot to say about the micro against the Queens, but ultimately the banelings are the biggest threat. And Daishi realizes that there weren't any banelings in those. He may figure that maybe he's just waiting for baneling speed or something. And that's the whole idea behind this push, is to get there before baneling speed finishes. So, not a lot has happened so far. We've really just talked about stuff that needs to happen once the battle comes. But if you feel more comfortable in the early stages of the game doing drops like this and trying to just peel them apart with different multi-pronged attacks, you can do stuff like that. And I think that's what Daishi wants to double check, because most of the time Zergs will try to get up Mutalisk, Baneling, and Zergling. So far he's really only seen Zerglings, so he's like, well, I need to know what's going on. So he's just going to drop inside the main here, see what's going on. He's just going to see that Mini Razor's just a little bit slow with everything. And like we talked about, I think Mini Razor actually did blow up his first banelings there by accident, which you can do, so that kind of sucks for him, but we'll see this continue to come forward. Before we get into too much of the Marine splitting, I'm just going to mention that supporting these Marines properly is essential. So right now they're being supported by Hellions, and that's just to kill a lot of Zerglings. And they're also being supported by these mines. And the mines are the most common way to support the Marines, and we'll talk about that micro once we get into a fight here. So Daishi's just starting to collect up here a little bit more of his forces. He's trying to deny creep the best he can. You don't want to be too crazy about running in there until it's really until you really feel like you have a good amount of support. So okay, this is going to be the first real attack so far. So he's going to start pushing in here, and notice how he's pre-splitting a lot of his forces, so that if he gets caught off guard, his splits from his Marines are pretty easy from this point. But the whole idea is just to spread out your mines like we can see here. They can also be tanks in a lot more rare circumstances. Some people like tanks. They can also be supported by Hellbats and Thors, even Marauders. There's a lot of units that can get mixed in with your Marines. It's basically any real units that's on the ground can be mixed in with your Marines. And if you can control properly, then they'll all do their job. But the job of these other units that are being serving the support role are either to kill banelings or to kill Mutalisks. But if you can eventually break it down to there's only Mutalisk versus Marines, that's a great fight for you, and that's the whole goal of most of these fights. So what we're going to see is he's going to start spreading his mines out, and then he's going to poke forward with just a small group of Marines. And once he pokes forward, he's going to try and lure the Zerg army and he's going to try to get the Zerg army to bunch up so that the mine shots kill a lot of units. And he's going to do that while running his Marines away at the same time, because you really need to keep as many Marines alive as possible. So you can see him already pre-splitting up his Marines here. This is just a constant task, and all the micro is really just grabbing Marines and just clicking them somewhere, grabbing more Marines, clicking them somewhere, and just keep doing that and just kind of spreading them out a little bit all over the place. It's going to happen really fast here, and that's why I have this on normal. And we might do more videos on Marine splitting in the future if we really need to, but I think just explaining the concept to you just kind of gives you an idea of what you need to do. So again, he's seeking forward with small groups of Marines. He really wants to lure a bunch of units forward. He needs to split up his Marines here and just kind of span them out a little bit. He's going to continue to crawl his mines forward here, considering the mine shots on the Banelings are really what you want to shoot for. And if the Mutalisks try to come up, you can bring your Marines forward to support that. So it's kind of a little bit of a dance involved here. He does lose a couple of mines there, so that kind of is unfortunate. But look, notice how he's just seeking with this small group of Marines. There's only 4 here. You can seek with more if you want to, but eventually you want to claim position with your mines. It's right next to a mining base so that they can't have it. So here come more little seek-ups here from Daishi. You can see part of it's seeking up here, and part of it's seeking up here. But we're going to get to the point where the Marine split starts to happen. So you can see the Marines are dealing a little bit of damage here, and he doesn't want to just attack in here haphazardly, because if he does, he's going to lose a lot of Banelings to these mines. You can see him splitting up his Marines just a little bit against that Baneling detonation. You want to make him waste as many as possible. And this is just going to be kind of a longer fight, where he just tries to bait him in here to make a bad decision. Look how fast the Marines die if you don't split them up. So you can see he lost a lot there. But now the Zerg's going to go, and you want to try and drag the Zerg army over these mines. So that's why all these Marines are back here. And note that the Marines are pretty split up already. So there's a bunch of different little groups that are together. And over here is where the Banelings are being targeted. So if you have Banelings chasing you like this, you want to make these Marines stop firing as soon as possible and get them to split up into small little groups. So if there is like an AI splitting against this, they would literally select every Marine and move that, but that's really not possible for you. You just want to grab small clumps and click them somewhere that are separate from everything else. So like you grab this clump here, click it here, maybe grab this clump here, click it forward, maybe grab this clump and click it over here, and just continue to spread out and fan out as much as you can against these Banelings. We're going to see this in action. So they didn't react in time, they got wasted, but you can see them splitting up little groups over here against these Banelings here, and that's going to be a constant theme with Marines, is constantly splitting up your units against the Banelings and just trying to make the Baneling shots as bad as possible. So let's start watching this in a little bit more of real time. Now that you understand the focus of this, and you can see how fast these pro players do it, and if you can emulate something like that, then Zergs are going to have a really hard time dealing with your Marine plays, and it's going to be really irritating from them. Note that he's also mixing in Marauders here, because Marauders take a lot of Baneling hits in order to kill. So typically when you're splitting up, you want to keep these Marauders at the front. They want to eat as many Baneling hits as possible, and that'll punish Zergs for just grabbing their army and attacking toward you if they waste like 5 or 6 Banelings on just one Marauder. And that's perfect for your Marines. They're really never going to die. I should also mention one thing that we kind of forgot during the build, is that upgrades are hugely important in this. That's what makes your Marines so strong. So get your double eBay up and get your double upgrade spinning as much as possible throughout the game. So he's going to burrow his mines here, just try to seek up and get a good position. He's going to pre-split his Marines here, and you'll notice he's always running around with little clumps of Marines. This is something you really need to practice. You can't just move in your whole army at the same time. And then again, if he starts to attack at you, just run away and let the mines deal their damage. Notice how he's keeping his Marines pre-split down here. This is all really, really good. So, like I said, we'll just watch this in real time here. Notice he's microing away from the army as best he can, trying to drag it over the mines. Microing away once again. Now all the army comes forward. And about half this army is eliminated right away, but because of the mine shots, and even more can be if you control perfectly. But as more Banelings start to trickle in here, you're going to see a little bit of control here from Daishi to try and prevent the Banelings from getting good connections. So you can see more splits here and there, just kind of moving armies around just a little bit, but the mines did most of the work, and his army was already pre-split when he started that. So pre-splitting is going to kind of do your work for you. And notice how he's still just seeking up with small little groups of units right now to try and get the Zerg to commit. Now that he has no mines, he might just want to wait for a few more to rally, so he's producing more here back at home. And you really don't want to commit too hard without a lot of mines unless you crushed him on a previous push. If you ever get to the point where there's just Marines against Mutalisks, which is the whole goal here, then the Marines should just shred up the Mutalisk, and that's basically going to end the game. So that's how most of these are going to go, assuming you're controlling this well. And notice the small little group of Marines just seeking up here, trying to make the Zerg commit. Not really a whole lot happening right now. He's starting to fan out his mines, so he's spreading them out just a little bit. Going to continue to try and prevent creep spread if he's on top of that. But this is more of the same stuff, and this is what most TvZ battles are going to break down to. It's just you trying to keep your Marines alive, and the Zerg trying to kill your Marines. So, seeking up here with another small group, going to burrow his mines and try to make him waste Baneling fire. You'll notice another good fact about splitting your Marines properly is that if you do, the Banelings won't get any connections at all. And that's what we just saw there. Mini Razor just wasted like 6 Banelings, and these Marines are all still alive, so that's good for him. More Banelings seeking forward. Notice how he's trying to pull away the best he can from those Banelings, trying to split the best he can. Pre-splitting once again is really important. Now he's starting to get really good position with his mines on top of the base, and it's really just all about you kind of crawling your mines and stuff up here until he can't really deal with this. But this should be probably our best example of Baneling splits so far, considering there's a lot of Banelings, and he's going to have to control pretty well to try and keep all this alive. Most of this is just going to be splitting up little groups, so you'd grab this, split it here, grab that, move it here, maybe start grabbing stuff back here and start fanning it back a little bit. You need to do whatever you can to keep him alive against this, and I'm going to slow it down once again so we can watch him do it. Notice those Marines are pretty screwed. He's trying to just split them the best as possible. The rest of them, he's just kind of clumping up a little bit, putting some in the medevac here, dropping them out one at a time. A lot of really cool micro, and if he does it right, there's still a lot of stuff on the field that's pushing forward. And notice the supply right now. It's 162 to 113. It doesn't really seem like Daishi is doing anything all that special, but the fact that Mini Razor's not getting that great of Baneling connections means that the Marines are still alive. You can still just walk up here and dominate Daishi, or rather Mini Razor, pretty hard, because Marines are strong units, especially if they have 3-3, which he's about to. So yeah, a lot of different micro tricks. Something that he did in that last battle that we didn't really talk about was loading him into the medevacs. That's one benefit of having medevacs against Banelings. Seeing a little bit more control here, trying to micro and split his Marines the best as possible. Notice how good this splitting is. There's just Marines kind of scattered all over the place, and if he does it right, yeah, GG. So there's a lot to absorb in this. It's not just as simple as, you know, attack up there and do whatever. If you're going to run Marine strategies, you need to put in a lot of work to keep these things alive. And micro-centric strategies are going to be prevalent in StarCraft forever, because it separates what makes good players and what doesn't make good players, I guess. So the best Terrans in the world will really have extremely good control as far as keeping their Marines alive and splitting them against Banelings and whatnot. So that's going to be a big focus, and you can go back and watch these battles. There's a lot of micro trainers you can use to help you practice for situations like this, so you can look out for that. But let's take a look at one more replay and take a look at a couple of different decisions that TvZ makes in this Marine-based strategy. So, like we said, most of the time people are going to open up with a Reaper. This time TvZ is going to open up Command Center first. And this is really just on a 4-player map. It usually takes Zergs quite a while to scout you, so that's kind of the whole idea behind this. And typically you're going to skip the Reaper phase with the Command Center first. You can make Hellions. I've even seen players very rarely just skip the Hellion phase altogether, so maybe you want to try that if you're not as comfortable with your Hellion play. But the Hellions get folded into pushes later. They're really useful. And if you have the control and APM to keep them alive while keeping everything going on back at home, then you could potentially kill a lot of workers. A lot of different rewards for Hellions. TvZ, of course, getting his bunker up here. This is pretty normal for any matchup, really. Just to put up one bunker at your natural. Starport on the way. So you can see these are going to be for pretty fast medevacs here. Or this is going to be for a Banshee, I'm sorry. That's a tech lab, not a reactor. So he's going to go for the Banshee route, just Hellion Banshee, just to start out harassing here. We're not going to pay too much attention to that, since we already have quite a bit. But the stim is on the way, and he's going to be adding barracks here as soon as he gets the funds for it. So he has a command center on the way, his third command. Again, this is all really normal stuff here. Here's the double engineering bay timing, by the way, that we missed last game, so my fault. Double engineering bay coming up right now. Looks like it's before he adds all of his extra barracks. But getting the upgrades on here is really important on these Marines, because if there's 0-0 Marines, they are one of the best or worst scaling units in terms of upgrades. So either they're going to deal a lot of damage for really cheap, or they're going to deal nothing and you're going to do nothing with them. So you want to keep up on your upgrades. So important. This time it's going to be different, though. We're not going to see as much play against the Banelings. This is going to be a different play from Hyun, which is going to be a Roach play. So we're going to see that Marines even have utility against these Roaches. We're going to explain little tricks you can do against those, but a lot of times these roaches can turn back into baneling and beetleless type of strategies, so that's what we're eventually going to see. Notice Tage's infrastructure is now a whole bunch of barracks. They all have reactors on them except for the one that's researching marine shields and stim. So the first couple of medevacs are coming out right now, and like we said, that's usually when the aggression can start from you, considering if you get into a bad spot, you can just, select all these and put them into your medevacs and get out of there. So that's kind of the whole idea behind the first two medevac timing. So he's starting to mix in his Hellions with the rest of his army. And he's going to be a little bit shocked to notice that Hyun has a lot of roaches on the field already. And this is the type of situation where you can't just be running in there as hard as you can, because these roaches are actually pretty hard to kill with only Marines. So this is where we start to talk a little bit more about mixing up your composition a little better. So if you're fighting roaches rather than banelings, the Marines are still useful, but you really need to support them with more Marauders and maybe more tanks and mines and stuff like that. Some people can do stuff like Banshee, but that's not really that stable, considering they usually, well, not usually, but sometimes will mix in Hydralisks or eventually Mutalisks, and that doesn't really bode very well. So support with either some Marauders or some tanks and or some mines. I guess mines are okay, but they're not as good as tanks. Supporting with some of those is going to keep your Marines alive, and like we said, the whole goal is to keep your Marines alive for as long as possible. So now that he knows there's a huge roach swell on the way, he's going to fall back to his base here and try to kill these roaches as economically as possible. So he's going to burrow a mine forward. There's not a lot of tricks you really need to do with your bio against roaches. If it's just coming down to this, you just need to spread them out well so that all of your bio is firing all at the same time. And if you can try and just kite away from them a little bit, because the Marines, we can see the range on there is 5. The range on the roaches is only 4, so you do have a little bit of a range advantage. It's especially prominent with the Marauder, who has 6 range versus 4. So you can kind of keep them out of range as long as possible. You can stim, shoot the ones that are in front, kind of move back a little bit, shoot the ones in front again, move back a little bit. Keep doing that over and over just to try to get a range advantage and just to keep most of his army not firing. So you can see the mine burrowing right now, but eventually he's going to have to engage this. He just dumps into the bunker here. You can repair, you can drop this. Most of the time against roach compositions, you're just going to be kind of backing up a lot of the time. So you can see him back up once again just to try and bait him into the mine shots. But just keeping everything firing, keeps the Banshee active, just needs to buy time a little bit. And the whole idea against roaches is that they're going to scale really poorly as the game goes on. So you're going to get stronger and stronger if you're able to defeat attacks like this. So he's still continuing to push up here, and notice how he starts to kite back here. That's what I'm talking about. It's just attacking, and then moving back, attacking, moving back. Keep doing that over and over and over, and eventually you should outrange the roaches, and if you keep the battle going for long enough, your medevacs are going to shine through. This is on normal speed, by the way. It's on slower than you're used to, just because I have a lot to say. So once the roaches are pushed back here, don't get too crazy about getting your units up in his face until you have more and have more support that'll properly mix in against these roaches. So now that he's held this, Tage should probably start switching on his add-ons here. You can see he's going to put down a factory here to eventually put out tanks to support his Marines. And the micro with that is really easy against the roaches. Just let the tanks deal as much damage as possible and keep your Marines alive. So if your Marines start to get attacked, just run them away. We'll talk more about dealing with roaches in another game, and we can see that Hyun has already started to switch into Banelings and Mutalisks, so this is going to be a little bit of a normal composition like we saw from last game. But still, I felt like the roaches were worth mentioning because you will see those every once in a while. So yeah, we're just going to fast forward up until a point where we start to see more fights, because this video is getting a tad long. So, I'm just going to wait until he has the right support here. He's starting to mix in tanks once again, and tanks can still be useful against these Banelings, but we'll see a little bit of that micro. Banshee's doing basically nothing. And here comes the attack once again. And like we talked about, this should be drilled into your head if you're using Marine strategies. The idea here is to get your mines as far forward as possible and spread them out. Seek with a small group of units and keep the rest of your units pre-split, and then just micro away from his army as it attacks in. So it's going to be a little bit different. There's not a lot of Banelings here on the field. We can see them morphing right now. But the concept is still the same. He's just demanding as much position as possible. They start to attack in, just run away and let the mines do their damage. So he's starting to get a little bit surrounded here. He needs to pull back, but he's confident enough that he has enough to just resist those attacks, considering he won a fight earlier against these roaches. Shouldn't be that big of a deal. Now the Mutalisks and Banelings are starting to filter in, and this is where you need to start to pull these away and split them up against the Banelings. You can see them coming from the left side. If you can drag them over the mines, though, then you might not have to split too hard. So we're going to see how much work the mines can do at this. Starting to pull away. The mines come and rain down all over the banelings, and because the mines did their work, look how many Marines are still alive, and Hyun's going to have a really hard time holding off the rest of this. So you can see him start to push forward. The other support we're going to see this game is going to be with Thors and Hellbats a little bit more. So we're not going to see the tanks come out like we were expecting, because TvZ realized that there weren't going to be more roaches on the field, so they weren't that necessary. But it's just keeping this going as long as possible. We can see a ton more banelings and morphing for Hyun right now. And TvZ, like I said, just needs to continue to keep these Marines alive and try to drag the army over the mines just to deal as much damage as possible. Once the Thors and Hellbats are out, though, we've talked about this in the unit composition video a little bit. Once the Thorbats, God, that would be a sick unit. Once the Hellbats and Thors are out, the idea is to get the banelings to hit the Thors and Hellbats as much as possible to keep your Marines alive. It's kind of the same idea, but the Thors are a lot more tanky than the mines, so if they mess up with their baneling micro, then it really punishes them. So just continue to seek up here. Doesn't want to get too crazy, and you can spend scans just to know what you're attacking into if you want to be a little safer. So here comes the fight now. TvZ is burrowing his mines already. He's trying to pre-split and everything. If you're going to go mines, you eventually do want to get drilling claws, so just keep that in mind. But up comes the attack now, and there's a ton of banelings here, so he just needs to focus on getting his mines burrowed and dragging the army across the mines once again. So a lot of banelings here. Let's slow it down. Notice that he's only pulling small groups of his Marines and leaving a few forward to hopefully absorb some baneling shots here. So the splits have really begun. I see him continue to split up here. Notice that the army is constantly fanning out here, and he's just doing that by grabbing small little groups and pulling them back. So really good Marine splits there once again. And again, the whole idea here is that if you still have Marines on the field once the battle is said and done, then you're in great shape. Sometimes they'll start to die, so you can pull them back in medevacs. But the reinforcements are here from TvZ right now, so he's just going to continue to do more of the same stuff. So the Thors, like I said, they're designed to kind of mess up baneling micro. They're designed to take damage from the banelings, but they also will deal well with the Mutalisks, so we can see a little bit of that cute micro there, but it's not too much of our focus right now. It's just trying to kill a couple of Mutas here, so you can see a couple of them do pop. And this is just going to be repeated, the same stuff over and over, just Marine mine, or Marine and whatever type of support you want to mix in with there. Just keep doing these fights over and over. Keep doing whatever you can to keep those Marines alive. Let's just quickly watch the rest of this game, and then we'll call this good. So you can see Hyun's trying to retake this base here. TvZ's at a really good advantage right now, considering he has equalized the economy. He's actually going to be a little bit ahead here in just a little bit. You can see Mutalisk starting to seek over here just a tad. We'll talk about dealing with Mutalisk harass in another video once again, but you can deal with that most of the time with just turrets, controlling your Marines and pushing them around the map a little bit, and also with Thors. It's not too much to worry about that, but we're going to eventually see TvZ push in here once again and start to try and fight this. There's also the opportunity for drops once again, which we need to kind of state, is that drops are a good way to try and get his army to overcommit in a bad position or something, or to move them out of the way. For example, if you drop over here and move his whole army, then you can get really good position with your mines and Marines on the other side. So it's kind of a little bit of what he's doing, but he's not exactly timing it perfectly, so he's getting some good mine burrows here, seeking up with a small group of Marines and stuff. Just pre-splitting here on purpose, just so that he doesn't have to micro as hard once the banelings start to come through. And again, this is just going to be more of the same stuff over and over with Marines. There's not a whole lot more to say, but we'll just watch the rest of this game just for the sake of watching Zerg die. So lots of Marines here in the main, trying to pull the army apart just a little bit. You can see how far back his army is. He just loses his base for free. TvZ is eventually going to close this out just because he has too much stuff, so I want to get to that point. Thors and stuff walking forward, Marines with them. Thors are always leading the charge, by the way, to try and eat as many baneling shots as possible. So coming up here, just going to burrow his mines, set his Thors out in the front, keep the Marines alive at all costs. So Marines are coming back here. You can notice that the Thors are doing a lot of work. The mines blow up everything. The Marines are still alive, and as long as there's Marines alive, you can continue to push in here. And if you get Marines versus Mutas, then you're going to be in really great shape. Notice he's able to tank all this baneling and roach fire because he does have 3-3, so that is a kind of a subtext of everything that's going on here. But this game is pretty much over. It's just one more follow-up attack here from TvZ, just walks up there and kills Hyun. So there's not a whole lot more to say or a whole lot more to do with this, so let's just call that good, shall we? So basically, just to summarize, splitting your Marines, supporting it with the right units, and controlling everything properly is going to give you ridiculous efficiency with your Marines if you can do it the right way, and that's the whole idea behind it. People don't just make Marines and Marauders just to move without any control in there, so you definitely do need to control your units properly in order to get the value out of them that is associated with what pro gamers get out of them. So, hope you guys enjoyed that. I'll be back with more videos all the time, so look out for that. I will talk to you later.